Every morning, I make my coffee the same way. 2 teaspoons of ground Colombian beans, measured precisely, not because I'm obsessive, but because at 72, routine is the only thing that doesn't betray you. The kettle whistles at exactly 6:40 at M.M. My old General Electric stove clicks twice before the flame catches. The mug is always the same one, white porcelain, chipped near the handle. Margaret used to say I should throw it away. Harold, it looks like it survived a war. It did, I would answer. 38 years of marriage. She would roll her eyes, but she never replaced it. Now it sits alone on the counter, like everything else in this house. The kitchen still smells faintly of cinnamon if you open the cabinet above the sink. That's where Margaret kept her baking spices. I haven't touched them since November 14th, 2021, the day after we buried her. Some things, if you move them, feel like they disappear forever. I carry my coffee to the living room, lower myself into the leather armchair, the one with the crack along the right armrest, and turn on the television. Channel 7, Morning News, volume at 12. Predictable, quiet, safe. At 7:15, my phone buzzes. Right on schedule. Dad. My son Daniel says, not bothering with a greeting. Did you see the email I sent last night? I take a sip of coffee. It's too hot, burned slightly. Good. It reminds me I'm still alive. I saw it. I say, another urgent situation? I assume. He exhales sharply. I can almost picture him running a hand through his hair. A habit he's had since he was 12 and couldn't solve a math problem. It's not like that. The bank is pressuring us. If we don't cover this payment by Friday, they'll add penalties. Daniel, I say slowly. You said the same thing in March, and again in June, and then in September. That was different. It always is. There's a pause. In the background, I hear the faint hum of a coffee machine. Something expensive, no doubt. Stainless steel. Digital display. Probably cost more than my first car. Look, he says, his voice tightening. We're not asking for much. Just $35,000. It'll stabilize everything. $35,000. I glance at the small wooden table beside me. My checkbook lies there, neatly aligned with a pen. Blue ink. Always blue. Stabilize what exactly? The mortgage, Dad. The business line of credit. You know everything I've told you about. Yes. Everything he's told me. Bits and pieces. Numbers without context. Urgency without clarity. How much is left on the house? I ask. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. About $280,000, I repeat. And how much have I already given you toward that house? That's not fair. I ask the question. Silence. I don't need his answer. I already know it. $120,000 over 3 years. Wire transfers, cashier's checks. One particularly memorable afternoon when I sat in a Wells Fargo office for 2 hours authorizing a $48,000 payment to prevent foreclosure. Foreclosure that never came. Dad. Daniel says, finally soften our family. You said you wanted to help us. You said Mom would have wanted that too. There it is. Margaret. Always Margaret. I close my eyes for a moment. I can see her standing in this very room, hands on her hips, looking at me the way she used to when I was about to make a mistake. Harold, she'd say, love doesn't mean you let people empty you out. I open my eyes. When do you need it? I ask. Friday. Of course. I'll see what I can do. Relief floods his voice instantly, warm and quick, like nothing had ever been wrong. I knew I could count on you, Dad. I'll send you the wiring details again, just in case. Send them. We hang up. I sit there for a while, staring at the television without really seeing it. Some anchor is talking about interest rates, inflation, the housing market. Words like volatility and uncertainty. Funny how those words sound different when they're about your life. At 8:30, I hear a car pull into the driveway. I don't need to look out the window. I know the sound, a smooth, quiet engine. German, if I had to guess. Daniel always did have expensive taste. The front door opens without knocking. Dad, a bright voice calls out. Melissa, my daughter-in-law. She walks in like she owns the place, which I suppose in her mind she already does. Good morning, she says, stepping into the living room. She's dressed in workout clothes, brand name tight, expensive. Her hair is pulled back perfectly, not a strand out of place. You're early, I say. I was in the neighborhood, she replies, smiling. Thought I'd stop by and check on you. Check on me. I nod toward the kitchen. Coffee's still hot. Oh, I don't drink that, she says lightly. Too acidic. Of course. She sits across from me, crossing her legs neatly. Her eyes scan the room. The furniture, the walls, the old bookshelf Margaret insisted we keep even when it started leaning slightly to the left. You know, she says casually, this house is really something. I don't respond. Have you ever had it appraised recently? There it is. Right on time. No, I say. Why would I? She shrugs, but her smile tightens just a little. Oh, no reason. It's just in this market, properties like this go for, what, 700? Maybe 800,000. 785, I say. Her eyebrows lift. I had it evaluated last year. Wow, she says softly. That's incredible. Yes, incredible. I take another sip of my coffee. It's gone lukewarm. You know, she continues, her voice turning thoughtful. It's a lot of house for one person. I look at her, really look at her. The perfect makeup, the calculated tone, the way her fingers rest lightly on her knee, nails polished in a pale, expensive shade. A lot of maintenance, she adds. A lot of responsibility. I've managed so far. Of course you have, she says quickly. But for how long? There's a silence between us now. Not uncomfortable, just honest. In the hallway, the old grandfather clock ticks steadily. 8:42 a.m. Tick, tick, tick. Melissa leans forward slightly. We've been talking, she says. Daniel and I, about what's best for everyone. Everyone. That word again. I set my mug down carefully on the table. And for the first time that morning, something cold and precise settles into my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. I see, I say quietly. And in that moment, though she keeps smiling, though the house looks exactly the same, though the clock continues its steady rhythm, something shifts, irreversibly. I just don't tell her that I've noticed. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. By Friday, the house felt different. Nothing had physically changed. The same creak in the third stair from the bottom, the same faint hum from the refrigerator, the same thin crack in the ceiling above the dining table that I had been meaning to fix for 6 years. And yet, something in the air had shifted, like a room after an argument, even when no one is speaking. At 9:12 a.m., I sat at my desk in the study. Margaret's old writing desk, oak, slightly scratched near the drawer handle, and logged into my bank account. The screen glowed too bright for that hour. Available balance, $412,860.73. I stared at the number longer than necessary, not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. Every dollar had a memory attached. Overtime shifts, canceled vacations, Margaret's careful grocery lists written in neat cursive, always under budget. Harold, she used to say, money is just time you've already spent. I suppose that made me very old. I clicked wire transfer. Recipient, Daniel Carter. Amount, $35,000. Date, April 14th. My finger hovered over the confirmation button. $35,000. Again, for a brief moment, just a flicker. I considered closing the laptop, standing up, walking into the kitchen, making another cup of coffee and pretending this conversation had never happened. But then I remembered Daniel at 8 years old, sitting at this very desk, struggling to write his name in cursive, his tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. Take your time, I had told him. Do it right. He had looked up at me and smiled like I was the smartest man in the world. I pressed confirm. Transaction complete. The sound was barely audible. A soft click, like a lock turning. At 10:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Got it, Daniel said without preamble. His voice was lighter now, almost cheerful. This buys us some breathing room. Good, I replied. Really, Dad, this means a lot. We'll get everything stabilized, and then we can start paying you back properly. I didn't respond, because we both knew that sentence had no weight left in it. Melissa mentioned something yesterday, he continued, about the house. Of course she did. She's just thinking ahead, he added quickly. You know, long-term planning. I'm 72, Daniel, not a leaking roof. That's not what I meant. It's what you said. A pause, then a small sigh, controlled, irritated. Look, we're just trying to be realistic. That place is what, almost 800,000 now. 785, right? Exactly. That's a huge asset just sitting there. Sitting there, Like it wasn't a home. Like it wasn't 40 years of living compressed into walls and floors and quiet evenings. And what would you suggest? I asked. Well, he hesitated. We've been talking to a financial advisor. Just exploratory stuff. There are options. You could refinance, or maybe transfer ownership gradually. Tax benefits, you know? I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly beneath me. Transfer ownership, I repeated. Eventually, he said quickly. Not now. Just setting things up properly. Properly. That way, when the time comes, everything is smooth. No complications. When what time comes, Daniel? Another pause. This one longer. We just want to avoid problems down the line, he said carefully. I smiled, not because it was funny, because it was precise. I see, I said. We ended the call a minute later. No argument. No raised voices. Just understanding. That afternoon, I drove to the bank. Not the usual branch. The one 5 minutes away where they knew my name and asked about the weather. No, I went downtown. 23 minutes, light traffic. Parked in a metered spot that cost $2.50 an hour. Inside, everything smelled faintly of polished marble and expensive perfume. Good afternoon, sir, the teller said. How can I help you today? I'd like to review my account access permissions. She blinked. Of course. Do you have someone currently authorized? Yes, I said. My son. She nodded, typing something into her computer. And you'd like to modify that? Modify. Such a gentle word. Not yet, I said. I'd just like a full record. Dates, signatures, any changes made in the last 3 years. Certainly. It took 15 minutes. 15 quiet, efficient minutes during which she printed page after page and slid them neatly into a folder. When she handed it to me, it felt heavier than paper should. Is there anything else I can assist you with? She asked. I looked at her, at the clean uniform, the polite smile, the complete lack of involvement in anything that actually mattered. No, I said, that will be all. I didn't open the folder until I got home. I sat at the dining table. The one Margaret insisted we buy, even though it was too large for just the two of us, and spread the documents out carefully. Dates, signatures, authorization forms, small changes at first, additional viewing access, then limited transfer permissions, then larger amounts, $12,000, June 3rd, $18,500, August 17th, $9,200, September 29th. My signature was on all of them, but I didn't remember signing half of these. I leaned back slowly, the chair legs scraping softly against the wooden floor. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Outside, a car passed by, tires whispering against asphalt. Ordinary sounds, normal, and yet I picked up one of the forms again. The handwriting looked like mine, but not quite. A little too neat, a little too practiced. For the first time, something sharper than suspicion settled in my chest. Not confusion, not doubt, something colder, deliberate. I gathered the papers into a neat stack, tapped them twice against the table to align the edges. Then I stood up, walked to the cabinet above the refrigerator, and took out Margaret's old recipe box. Inside, beneath handwritten cards for apple pie and roast chicken, was a small envelope. Important, she had written on it. I opened it carefully. Inside were copies of our original signatures, mortgage documents from 1998, insurance forms, old, unquestionable proof of who we were when we still trusted the world. I placed one of the new authorization forms beside it, compared, line by line, curve by curve, and then I exhaled slowly, because now I understood something I hadn't wanted to see before. This wasn't just dependence. It wasn't just carelessness, and it certainly wasn't love. It was something much simpler and much uglier. They hadn't just been asking for my help. They had been taking it, and somewhere along the way, they had stopped asking at all. The call came 3 days later, Sunday evening, 6:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I had just taken the meatloaf out of the oven, Margaret's recipe. The mine always comes out a little drier than hers did. The kitchen smelled of onions and black pepper, the kind of smell that used to mean someone else would walk in and say, Harold, you're overcooking it again. Now, it just meant dinner for one. My phone buzzed on the counter. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Dad, he said, his voice lower than usual, are you home? I generally am, I replied. At my age, spontaneous travel loses its appeal. A brief chuckle. Forced. Good. Melissa and I would like to stop by, just for a quick conversation. I glanced at the oven clock. 6:48. About what? It's easier to explain in person. Of course it was. Come by, I said. Dinner's at 7. They arrived at 7:12. Late, but not apologetic. Daniel walked in first, keys still in his hand, like he wasn't sure if he'd be staying long. Melissa followed, carrying a folder, slim, black, professional. The kind of folder that doesn't hold recipes or family photos. Paperwork. Smells good, she said, glancing toward the kitchen. It's meatloaf, I replied. You don't eat that. She smiled politely, the way people do when they're pretending to be human. We won't stay long. That at least was honest. We sat at the dining table. I placed 3 plates out of habit, then removed one when neither of them reached for utensils. Small things like that, they tell you more than words. So, I said, folding my hands, what's so important it couldn't wait until tomorrow? Daniel and Melissa exchanged a look, a quick one, rehearsed. Melissa opened the folder. Inside were documents, clean, structured, tabs on the side. Harold, she began, not Dad, never Dad. We've been doing some long-term planning, for your benefit. I nodded slowly. I'm listening. She slid the first document across the table. Property transfer agreement. The word sat there in bold print. Simple, clear, final. This would allow us to gradually transition ownership of the house, she explained. It's a very common strategy. Minimizes estate taxes, avoids probate complications, and gives you control, I said. Daniel shifted in his chair. It's not about control, he said. It's about efficiency. Of course it is. I picked up the document, flipping through the pages slowly. Legal language, percentages, timelines, 50% within 6 months, full transfer within 18. $785,000, I said quietly. That's what you're planning for. Dad, it's not like that. It's exactly like that. Melissa leaned forward slightly. You'd still live here, of course, she said smoothly. Nothing would change for you day to day. Nothing. Except ownership. Except control. Except the small detail of who decides what happens next. And what happens, I asked, if I decide I don't want to do this? Another look between them. This one slower. Heavy. Why wouldn't you? Daniel said, it's logical. Logical, I repeated. I set the papers down carefully. In the silence that followed, the grandfather clock in the hallway struck 7. 1, 2, 3. Each chime landed like a marker. Daniel, I said, how much money do you think I've given you over the past 3 years? He blinked. What? Rough estimate. I don't know, he said quickly. We've never kept track like that. I have. I stood up, walked to the sideboard, and returned with a thin stack of papers. Bank records, transfers, dates. I placed them in front of him. He looked down, didn't touch them. $158,000, I said. That's the number as of Friday. Melissa's expression didn't change. Professional, contained. That was your choice, she said. Yes, I agreed. It was. I leaned back slightly, studying them both. And these? I tapped the second stack, the authorization forms. Also my choice? Daniel frowned. What is that? Take a look. He hesitated, then picked up the top page. I watched his face. Confusion first, then recognition, then something else, something tighter. Dad, Go on, I said quietly. He flipped to the next page, and the next. Melissa leaned over, scanning quickly. Her eyes moved faster than his. Too fast. These are just standard authorizations, she said. You signed them. Did I? Silence. The kind that doesn't ask questions. The kind that already knows the answer. I compared signatures, I continued. Old ones. New ones. Daniel set the papers down slowly. Are you accusing me of something? He asked. There it was. Not denial. Not outrage. Just calculation. I'm asking. I said, how many times you decided it was easier not to? Melissa straightened. This is ridiculous, she said sharply. We've done nothing illegal. Not yet, I replied. The word hung there. Uncomfortable. Real. Daniel pushed his chair back, slightly. You're overreacting, he said. We're trying to help you. Help me, I repeated. I stood up slowly. My joints protested, but I ignored them. I buried my wife 5 years ago, I said. I maintain this house. I pay my bills. I kept my mind clear enough to remember every dollar I earned and every dollar I gave. I looked at him, at my son, and now you're sitting in my home, asking me to sign it away, while quietly taking money I don't remember authorizing. Dad. No, I said. Just one word. Sharp. Final. No. Silence filled the room. Thick. Unavoidable. Melissa closed the folder with a soft, controlled motion. I think we should leave, she said. Yes, I replied. I think you should. They stood. No shouting. No dramatic exits. Just tension wrapped in politeness. At the door, Daniel paused. You're making a mistake, he said. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. I'm correcting one. The door closed behind them with a quiet click. I stood there for a moment, listening to the fading sound of their car. Then I walked back to the dining table. The meatloaf had gone cold. I sat down, cut a piece anyway, and took a bite. Dry, overcooked, but edible. Across from me, 2 empty chairs. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. I felt something else, something sharper, something steady. And for the first time since Margaret died, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. On Tuesday morning, exactly 9:00 a.m., I sat in a law office that smelled faintly of leather and old paper, the kind of place where decisions are made quietly and then enforced loudly. Mr. Carter, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. I've reviewed the documents you brought in. His name was Richard Bell, 60, maybe 65, crisp suit, calm eyes, the kind of man who doesn't rush because he knows time works for him. And I asked. He folded his hands neatly on the desk. You have a strong case. Not a case. A strong one. The words settled in my chest with a quiet weight. What kind? I asked. Potential financial abuse. Unauthorized transactions. Possibly forgery. Depending on how aggressively you want to pursue it. Forgery. Such a clean word for something so personal. I nodded slowly. And the house? He glanced at another file. Fully in your name. No encumbrances beyond standard property tax. No legal claims from your son or daughter-in-law. Good, I said. However, he added, based on these documents, he tapped the authorization forms. They've been positioning themselves for control. Gradual but deliberate. Yes, I said. I noticed. He leaned back, slightly. The question is, how far do you want to take this? I looked at the window behind him. Downtown traffic moved in slow lines. People crossing streets, checking their phones, living lives that didn't intersect with mine. How far can it go? I asked. He smiled faintly. All the way. By Thursday, the plan was in motion. Efficient, structured, quiet, just the way I like things. At 11:30 a.m., I signed 3 documents. First, immediate revocation of all account access permissions. Second, formal notice to the bank flagging prior transactions for investigation. Third, a legal injunction preventing any transfer, sale, or claim against my property without direct court approval. Each signature was steady, clear, undeniably mine. Once these are processed, Richard said, your son will no longer have access to anything. Not your accounts, not your financial records, nothing. And the past transactions? We'll file a formal request for review. If discrepancies are confirmed, funds can be frozen, potentially recovered. Potentially. I nodded. That's enough. He studied me for a moment. You're being restrained, he said. I'm being precise. He smiled again. Fair enough. The call came that same afternoon. 2:14 p.m. Right on schedule. Dad. Daniel's voice came through, tight, controlled. Did something happen with the bank? I was in the kitchen, washing a plate I didn't need to wash. Yes, I said. What did you do? I dried my hands slowly, deliberately. I corrected access permissions. You cut me off, he snapped. There it was. Not concern, not confusion, anger. I adjusted things to reflect reality, I replied. Reality, he said, his voice rising. The reality is I've been managing those accounts for years. Managing? I repeated. Yes, managing. Helping you. Taking, I said quietly. Silence. Sharp. Immediate. You don't know what you're talking about, he said finally. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I walked into the living room, sat down in my chair. Comfortable, familiar, but there's also a review process underway, I added. What does that mean? It means someone other than me is now looking at the numbers. His breathing changed, subtle, but noticeable. Dad, you don't need to involve lawyers in this. Too late. That decision has already been made. This is insane, he said. We're your family. Yes, I said. You are. And this is how you treat us. I smiled slightly. No, I said. This is how I respond to you. He didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he switched tactics. Softer now. Look, we can fix this. Whatever you think happened, we can sit down and talk it through. We did that, I interrupted. On Sunday. That was different. It always is. A long pause. Then, you're going to regret this, he said quietly. Not loud, not dramatic, just cold. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the ceiling crack above the dining room doorway. I already regret something, I said. This isn't it. I hung up. The first culmination came faster than I expected. Saturday, 1:05 p.m. I was sitting on the front porch, a cup of coffee in my hand, fresh this time, properly measured, when a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Not Daniel's. This one was newer, cleaner. Two people stepped out. A man in a gray suit, a woman with a tablet in her hand. They walked up the path with polite, practiced smiles. Good afternoon, the man said. We're here to view the property. I looked at him, calmly. Are you? Yes, he said, glancing at his notes. We have a scheduled showing 1:00 p.m. Of course they did. I nodded slowly. And who arranged that? He checked his tablet. Daniel Carter. I took a sip of my coffee, let the silence stretch just long enough. Then I stood up. Well, I said, this should be interesting. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. Please, I added, my voice even almost polite. Come in. They exchanged a brief glance, then followed me inside. The house was quiet, orderly, exactly as it had always been. I led them to the living room. Beautiful space, the woman said, typing something into her tablet. Yes, I replied. It is. At 1:12 p.m., the front door opened again, this time without hesitation. Dad, I told you. Daniel stopped mid-sentence. Melissa beside him, both frozen, because they weren't alone. The couple turned. Their room shifted. And for a brief, perfect moment, everything aligned. Daniel, I said calmly, setting my coffee down on the table, you brought guests. His face drained of color. What is this? He demanded. I looked at him, really looked, and I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. Crisp, official, dated. I believe, I said, unfolding slowly. This is where we clarify ownership. The room went very quiet, and for the first time, they weren't in control of it. No one spoke for a few seconds. Not the couple with the tablet. Not Melissa. Not even Daniel. Silence, I've learned, is rarely empty. It's usually full of calculations. What is this? Daniel repeated. But this time his voice had lost its edge. There was something else in it now. Uncertain. I unfolded the document completely and placed it on the dining table. Temporary injunction, I said. Filed Thursday. Effective immediately. The man in the gray suit stepped closer, adjusting his glasses. Is there a problem? He asked carefully. No problem, I replied. Just a misunderstanding about ownership. Melissa recovered first. She always did. This is private, she said sharply, turning to the couple. We'll need to reschedule. I raised a hand. No, I said. They're already here. It would be rude not to clarify. Daniel took a step toward me. Dad, stop this, he said under his breath. You're embarrassing yourself. I looked at him, at the man who used to ask me how to tie his shoes. At my age, I said calmly, embarrassment is a luxury. I prefer accuracy. I turned to the couple. My son here, I continued, attempted to schedule a showing for a property he does not own. Legally, he has no authority to sell, list, or even represent this house in any transaction. The woman lowered her tablet slightly. Oh, she said. Yes, I nodded. Oh. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're twisting things, he snapped. We were just exploring options. Without informing the owner, I added. Melissa stepped forward. Harold, this isn't necessary, she said, her tone shifting, soft and now controlled. We're family. We can handle this privately. I almost smiled. That word again, family. I gestured toward the document. It is being handled, I said. The man in the gray suit cleared his throat. I think we should leave, he said quietly to his colleague. A wise decision, I replied. They didn't argue. They didn't ask questions. They simply gathered their things and walked toward the door, quickly, professionally, like people who had just realized they'd stepped into something they couldn't invoice for. The front door closed behind them with a soft click, and then it was just us. Daniel turned to me, his composure cracking. What the hell are you doing? He demanded. There it was. No more politeness. No more performance. Just anger. Protecting myself, I said. From what? From your own son? Yes. The word landed harder than I expected. Even on me. Melissa crossed her arms. This is because of those documents, isn't it? She said. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Am I? They were standard forms, she insisted. You signed them. I walked to the table, picked up one of the copies, and held it up. Then you won't mind if a forensic analyst takes a closer look, I said. Daniel's face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. A flicker. A crack. Dad, he started. No, I said. Let's stop pretending this is a misunderstanding. I placed the paper back down. Careful. You didn't just ask for help, I continued. You took money. Repeatedly. Quietly. And when that wasn't enough, you started positioning yourselves for the house. That's not true. It is, I said, my voice still calm. And now there's a record of it. Melissa's tone sharpened. You're going to drag your own family through court? If necessary. For what? She demanded. Money. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I let a small piece of what I felt show through. No, I said quietly. For clarity. Daniel let out a harsh laugh. This is unbelievable, he said. After everything we've been through. Yes, I interrupted. After everything. The room fell silent again. Different this time. Heavier. Because now there was nothing left to misunderstand. Let me make this simple, I said. I straightened slightly, feeling the weight of my years in my bones, but also something steadier beneath it. You have no access to my accounts. Daniel opened his mouth. I raised a hand. You have no authority over this house. Melissa's lips pressed into a thin line. And as of Thursday, I added, every transaction over the past 3 years is under review. They stared at me, not with anger now, with something else. Fear. Small, but there. You can still walk away from this, I said. Quietly, cleanly. Daniel shook his head slowly. You're serious, he said. I've never been more so. Another pause. Then Melissa spoke. Low, controlled. And if we don't, I met her gaze. Then it won't be quiet. They left without another word. No slamming doors. No shouting. Just retreat. The kind that happens when a line has been crossed and can't be uncrossed. I stood in the hallway for a moment after they were gone. The house felt different again. Not lighter. Not heavier. Just mine. Completely. I walked back into the living room, picked up my coffee, now cold again, and sat down in my chair. Outside. The afternoon sun stretched across the lawn. The same lawn I had mowed for decades. The same porch where Margaret used to sit with her tea. Everything looked the same. But it wasn't, because something had finally been settled. Not in court, not on paper, but here, inside this house, inside me. I took a slow sip of the cold coffee and didn't bother grimacing. Some things don't need to taste good to feel right. And for the first time in years, I wasn't wondering what they would take next. I was deciding what I would keep. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, 9:03 a.m. I remember the time because I had just finished watering the small row of plants Margaret insisted we keep along the side of the house. Rosemary, thyme, and something that never quite grew right no matter how much attention she gave it. Not everything responds to care, she used to say. Some things just are what they are. At the time, I thought she was talking about plants. The envelope was thick, official, my name printed in clean, impersonal type. I didn't rush to open it. At my age, urgency is rarely good news. I carried it inside, set it on the dining table, and made myself a cup of coffee first. Fresh, properly measured. The ritual mattered. Then I sat down, adjusted my glasses, and opened it carefully. Inside were 3 documents. The first was from the bank. Investigation summary. Account activity review. I read it once, Then again. Then a third time, slower. Unauthorized transactions totaling $67,800 had been identified over a period of 19 months. Not suspected, not ambiguous. Identified, flagged, documented. 2 signatures were deemed inconsistent with verified samples. That was their polite way of saying what it really was. Forgery. The second document was shorter. A notice of temporary account freezes. Not mine. Theirs. Joint accounts Daniel had opened. Lines of credit tied to those same funds. Suspended pending further review. I leaned back in my chair, the wood pressing gently against my spine. Quiet. Clean. Precise. The third document came from Richard. A brief note typed efficient. Harold, given the findings, we can proceed with formal recovery action. However, based on timing, I suspect you may receive contact from them first. I recommend you let them speak before deciding next steps. I folded the papers neatly, placed them back in the envelope, and waited. The call came at 11:26 a.m. Not Daniel. Melissa. Harold, she said, skipping any pretense of warmth. We need to talk. Her voice was different now, tighter, controlled in a way that suggested effort. I imagine you do, I replied. This has gone too far. No, I said. It's gone exactly where it was heading. A pause. Then, they've frozen our accounts, she said. Do you understand what that means? Yes. Our mortgage payment is due in 8 days. I'm aware. Silence. Sharp. Breathing on the other end. We can resolve this, she said finally. If you withdraw the complaint. There it was. Not apology. Not explanation. A transaction. I stood up slowly, walked to the window, and looked out at the street. A delivery truck passed by. A neighbor walked his dog. Ordinary life. Unaffected. You're asking me, I said, to undo a process based on facts so you can avoid the consequences of those facts. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. Her tone hardened. You're going to ruin your own son. I let that sit for a moment. Then I answered. No, I said quietly. He did that himself. The line went silent. Then, what do you want? She asked. A simple question. Finally, I turned away from the window, back into the room that had held my entire life. The table, the chairs, the faint smell of coffee and old wood. What do I want? I repeated. Yes. I thought about it. Not long. Just enough. I want the truth, I said. On record. She didn't respond. I want acknowledgement of every unauthorized transaction, I continued. In writing. And I want full repayment of the confirmed amount. $67,800. That's impossible right now. Then it will be scheduled. Another pause. And the house, she asked carefully. I almost smiled. The house, I said, is no longer part of any conversation. They came that evening. Both of them. No folder this time. No rehearsed smiles. Daniel looked smaller. Not physically. Something else. Like a structure that had been carrying too much weight for too long and had finally started to crack. We sat at the same table. Same positions. Different people. I didn't think it would go this far, he said. No, I replied. That doesn't excuse it. No, I said. It doesn't. Melissa said nothing, for once. I need you to say it, I told him. He looked up, confused. Say what? The truth. The word hung there, heavy, unavoidable. His hands tightened slightly on the edge of the table. Then, we used the money, he said, without telling you. I waited. Some of the forms, he hesitated, his voice dropping. I signed them. There it was. Simple. Ugly. Real. Melissa closed her eyes briefly, but didn't interrupt. I nodded once. Thank you, I said. Not forgiveness. Acknowledgement. I slid a document across the table. Prepared. Structured. Final. Repayment schedule, I said. 36 months. Fixed amounts. No extensions. Daniel looked at it. Then at me. You're serious. I've never been more so. He nodded slowly and signed. They left just before 9. Quietly, like strangers who had once known the layout of the house, but no longer belonged in it. I didn't follow them to the door. I stayed at the table, listening to their footsteps fade, then disappear. Later that night, I turned off the lights one by one. Kitchen, living room, hallway. The house settled into its usual silence. Familiar, steady. I stood for a moment in the dark, my hand resting on the back of the chair where Margaret used to sit. "You were right," I said quietly. "Not everything responds to care. Some things just are what they are." I went to the kitchen, rinsed my cup, and placed it by the sink. Tomorrow morning, I would make coffee again. Same way, same mug, same quiet. But something fundamental had changed. Not the house, not the routine, me. Because for the first time in years, no one was living off what I had built. And no one ever would again. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription.